All right, good afternoon. We'll get started a couple minutes late. Good place to be on a rainy day, I guess. But anyways, welcome to our Thursday LEPC meeting for the month of September. On this particular LEPC day, we thought we'd have the police present a little bit of a discussion or overview of active shooter concerns in the community. But before we get there, I just wanted to go over a couple of things. But we felt it was very important based on all that's going on around many of the various communities throughout the country, the impacts that have been there, what our local police is doing, and what their response would be. So we thought we'd put that out to everybody and give you a little bit of an update on what the town of Falmouth is doing, especially on the police department's planning side of things, and provide that as a topic for everybody. But in the interim, though, I wanted to just kind of review an event that happened last week that was in the news with everybody, that involved a little bit of the LEPC on the periphery, and specifically the issue with the immigrants that were arrived over on the vineyard. There was obviously it's in the news. It was the news cycle. It's still a news cycle, but the activity from many different agencies and communities that went beyond the vineyard included the town of Falmouth. So when the immigrants arrived over on the island, it was in the news on that evening. But the next day is when we started to develop a lot more information that was coming from the island, and specifically there was many rumors that were starting to be very active, that were stating that there were going to be 50 to 180 more immigrants that were going to be arriving in the community by bus. Not only just Falmouth, but Hyannis, I think even Northampton. There's various places in the state that were kind of being given updates on that, to be on the on the lookout, and there was a potential that we could have people arriving. Falmouth, as you know, because of the Woods Hole Steamship Authority, was the concern that there was going to have some these buses arriving. So you can imagine that by that morning after their arrival, the text messaging started to run amok, so to speak. We started to receive a lot of discussion back and forth from all of the other partners in other communities, and specifically for me, the fire chiefs that were being affected. Because if that was to happen, it would trigger some mutual aid resources. If we did have a large amount of immigrants that were showing up, and if they needed medical aid or anything like that and other resources, it could certainly impact our community. So we started to discuss back and forth and getting everybody's to start thinking about what they would do and kind of having just a quick verbal plan. The other issue is that the rumors were so fast and furious, nobody really knew whether there was any validity to it, and that's always a problem. And at one point, I was even contacted by the island itself from the command center that there was a bus in Woods Hole with 50 persons in the parking lot, which wasn't true. So at one point, we kind of, instead of reacting to that, we just started to make phone calls because we were ready and we knew who to contact. So through the local police department and the state police, we were able to quickly ascertain that that was not true. It was a rumor, but the individual that was giving the information to the command center, passing it to us, was a valid person in the chain, but it didn't come to light. So as you can imagine, all these things that were going on, all these things that were going on were fast and furious. So by the afternoon, there had been plans that were put in place by the state through the governor's office because they needed approvals. That was looking towards Joint Base Cape Cod as the resource point, or the area that was going to be able to take the immigrants and be able to house them and support them and put them in a more isolated area, not a secure area. I know that was kind of brought up a lot. It had nothing to do with security, so to speak. It had to do with just kind of putting them in a place that you know, they could get the services and not be in an area that would have difficulty trying to maintain, you know, the amount of resources that were necessary to kind of support everybody. So once that was determined, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Association, or MEMA, got a hold of all of this and started putting it all together and put us all into these chat groups very quickly. So by the evening, we had one phone call, I think it was, we had a call, and then the next morning we had another conference call. And all the questions were answered, all the planning was in place, and it really started to evolve so that if something like that did occur, we were able to process anything that was coming into the community, but it allowed us to now begin to formulate a plan should it happen in the near future, because there's always that continuous news cycle of threats and things that are going on by various groups that we may have more of this going on. But I think in the long and short of it, to me, at the end of the day, I described, you know, the events of 2 days as just a tabletop exercise. It was evolving the whole time, and it allowed us to get the thinking going, the discussions going, and I think by the time it was done, if anything was to have taken place, we would have been able to mobilize everybody and get some things done. So that being said, Kim was able to contact the CERT team, which is our local volunteer group that can help, and she contacted Mel Trott to see if anybody was available, because specifically the county, in working with the state, was trying to look to see if there was going to be anybody that could help support the activities out at the base, because as you can imagine, the state can put a lot of resources together, but they needed a lot of personnel to support the activity out there, and you can imagine it was quite voluminous. So along with CERT, the police department, the communications department over at the police station, our mutual aid partners, and a host of others, we were able to to quickly determine that if we needed to mobilize in the town of Falmouth, we would partially activate this room as our emergency operations center, and we had our staff ready, and they were notified and given a heads up if we had to get together quickly, we would have been able to do so, and we could put that together, and that's where all the department heads and town government would come together, and we would continue to oversee and manage the issue. That never came to be, but we were ready. And then we developed a plan and a procedure that we passed out to all of our partners that we would be able to follow, and we made it a one-page sheet so that it had the correct phone numbers that we could call, so that we wouldn't be getting steered all over the place, but we knew exactly who to call if there was something going on. So now we can put this in place, because again, for probably the third time I'm going to say, we keep getting, every once in a while you get a report or you see something in the news that this is still ongoing. So that being said, I think that the events last week, which was very difficult for many to see happening over there, and the amount of resources that are necessary just for that. But you can imagine if it turned into an emergent issue where we had people that were injured or sick and things like that, and the resources that are being taxed, people just don't think about. But fortunately, the town of Falmouth is very well situated with many other surrounding communities that can support one another, and including the human services that had reached out to us, and they were prepared to offer anything from the community. So we were, there was a lot of dialogue going on, and I was really thankful for that, because in the end, the fire and police are generally the lead agencies, along with having everybody else in the room. But a lot of things fall on us because we're the 24/7 operation. But I got to thank everybody that was involved, which leads me to the activities out at the base. I wasn't involved in any of that. After I think the second phone call, I don't think we needed to have any more conference calls after that, because it was so well in tune with supporting everybody out there, that it just started to flow very quickly. However, our local CERT, as I mentioned, was actively involved, and specifically, we had Andy Abbott that took the call, and he went out there to help, and he was, it was specific for him because of the activities that he was involved with, and maybe Andy can share a little bit, but Chip O'Reilly, who is with the Regional Emergency Preparedness group in Barnstable, stated that he was a big asset. He brought up a couple of things that they hadn't thought about, and it helped to develop their flow out there as well. So we got to thank one of our locals for helping out and to for making that operation work. So thank you. But Chip couldn't say enough, so we appreciate it, and Mel for getting Andy mobilized. Anyway, so I figured that in the end, the LEPC is all about the community and looking out for things that are going on in the community during emergencies. This isn't necessarily an emergency, but it's an impact that involves a lot of resources, emergency resources, because we're able to manage things. We wanted to just kind of update everybody with that. So that's how the end of our week went last week. But specifically for today, which we can segue into, we wanted to bring everybody up to date on what I stated, which was to kind of talk about active shooters in the communities. And unfortunately, we hear it far too often in the news. It's a devastating impact on the community. It's devastating for those that are involved, obviously, for the injured, for the people that are killed as a result of any of these hostile acts. But it's just a devastating effect from the first responders all the way into the communities, families, and it goes on and on. But we see it too often, and whereas many years ago when Columbine was in the news, it seemed to be an isolated incident, but it's not isolated anymore. The police can obviously articulate that a little better. But just to go over my perspective on it, I went to a program the other day. It was called Crisis Leadership in Extreme Events, and the speaker that was there is a retired fire chief in the FDNY who oversaw the counterterrorism group and emergency planning for the city, and he gave his perspective on many events that happened in New York, obviously, but he was the first ranking fire officer at the 9/11 event when the towers were struck. So he was the first person of authority that started to oversee the mobilization of the FDNY to start to rescue all of the individuals in the towers. At that time, it was only one tower that was struck while he was there. So his perspective and his discussion with us was really moving. But in talking about these extreme events, the last thing he spoke about was active shooter, because to him, that's an evolving issue for many communities. And I know sometimes I really don't like the terminology, but it's not when, it's not if, it's when. I hope that never comes to our community, but we've had incidences of violence in this community that have impacted us recently, and again, they can speak on that, but it may not be in mass, but it doesn't matter. Anything that is of a violent nature that happens in the community affects all of us. So, a couple of things that, I took out of it was that he made a very good point when it came down to the response, because any type of an active shooter is absolutely a law enforcement, response. That's their bailiwick, that's what they're experts at. They're the ones who are going to come into the scene, and they're going to try and manage the crisis at hand, which is the shooting itself, and trying to mitigate it. But he gave three really, poignant, considerations or approaches to a response. And similar to, I don't know if anybody familiar with the terminology "stop the bleed." So "Stop the Bleed" is a program that was initiated soon after it actually came out of a lot of the war zones over Afghanistan and those areas, that the military was very very good at putting tourniquets on limbs because there was so much devastating injuries that were occurring on the battlefield. And that kind of transcended into the marathon bombing when they had so many people that were injured and had limbs that were affected. And one of the things is to be able to put tourniquets on people right away. If anybody ever took first aid at some point, they always said that use of tourniquets was the last thing that you'll ever do. Now it's the opposite. It's the first thing that you do is to try and stop the bleed. Because if you don't stop the bleed, people can bleed out, and it doesn't take very long, especially if you have hit a major vessel. And once that happens, the timing is not on the side of the victim, especially in a community where you're not near a trauma center. Falmouth is very fortunate. We have a hospital that could take care of that, but it's not a trauma center. But it's got very talented and very highly skilled persons that work in the ER that can take care of that. But the first people on scene, first responders, or people in the community can stop the bleed, and they might have an impact on saving that person's life. So the response that he had kind of gave as something that he has seen, because he's been worldwide at many different events post action, and he's talked to a lot of people. So he kind of had three approaches, and where we have "stop the bleed," he kind of made the term "stop the killing." So stop the killing is done through law enforcement. They engage the shooter, they engage the shooters, if that's the case, and they try and stop more casualties from being affected at that particular incident. Second approach is to stop the dying. So stop the dying occurs from the first responders that respond in conjunction with the police department, mainly fire and EMS, and we go in there and we work with the police department to form what we have, the term is called a rescue task force, where the police go and actively engage the shooter. We come up and we work in secured areas where we will treat those victims that we come upon. The police department unfortunately has to go by the victims that might be in an area, and then we need to have people come in with us, mainly more law enforcement, to protect us, and we can start taking care of any of the victims. So that's where the term "stop the dying" comes along. And the last thing is, because as we're talking about the community, is start the healing. So where we have two responses that are stop this and stop that, the next one is to start something, which is to start the healing. So we see it in the news, and we've read about it, where the communities all come together, whether there's a vigil, whether they're supporting it through faith-based groups, just communities that have been impacted, and they come together to try and support one another and try and get over this. Unfortunately, the effects are long-term for many, especially in some of these violent acts that have happened around the world. The one incident that he brought up was the incident in Paris in 2015, I believe it was, where about 130 people were killed, by random shooters that affected people that were in a stadium and a few cafes that were just enjoying the night. People were just enjoying the night, including the president of Paris, who was at the stadium when this bombing took place, and then some other effects that were being seen citywide. So, but you can imagine, there was about 130 people killed and over 400 injured. So the devastating effects on the entire community wasn't just within the city limits, it was beyond the city limits, and it was worldwide. It brings up a lot of emotions for a lot of people that have been involved in that before. So anyways, it's very important for us as a community to, if something like that happens, everybody wants to help, and in time, we can all support one another, and I think that it's important just to kind of have that in the back of your mind. If, similar to last week when this event was going on, a lot of people were coming out of their way to, whether it was to bring clothing or food or something like that. And similar to law enforcement and fire department, when we're affected and if an officer, God forbid, is killed, or a firefighter, God forbid, is killed, people come to the station and try and, because they're grieving too. They might not necessarily know any of us, but they just know that they're there to support us. So sometimes we're the recipients of a lot of different food items and things like that. When people come and support us in that regard, we can't thank people enough. On a regular day, we also have people stop here and give us food. So that's, so sometimes it had nothing to do with trauma or anything like that. People just like to come by and so do it. And I know they do it for the police department, maybe not as much as the police department, but for the fire department, they do a lot. It's locked though. But but again, you can imagine how well received that is for us. But and this will allow me to segue into Captain Lowens is going to start, and he can make his introductions and he can explain a little better on what the police department would do. But I think in the end, if God forbid anything like that happened in Falmouth and in the near future or beyond, that that we just have to kind of understand what our role is, whether it's family or whether it's agency or whatever the case may be. But we all play a part in it, whether you know it or not. Just by being here right now, you're supported and you're part of the community. So I appreciate your presence today. I appreciate everything that's been done, and and even if you're not playing a particular role in anything, just being here is could you never know. So anyways, that being said, Cap, I'll hand it over to you. Who's doing talking? Okay. Yes.
Good afternoon, folks.
Hi, Paul.
Brian Lowen, I'm a captain of the Falmouth Police Department. I'm in charge of special services. My partner here, Jim Porter, he is a firearms instructor as well as a member of our special response team. I'm going to have Mr. Porter here just kind of give you a broad overview of how our response would look at an active shooter type of event. I'll follow up with some of the things we're doing in conjunction with the school department and the fire department, and we can open it up for a discussion after that if that works for everybody here. All right, Jim?
Thank you. So first, a couple of things just to let you know, as one of the training officers from the department, some of the things that the police department has done and is continuing to do as far as so that we're prepared for these types of events. First off, all of our officers are trained on our ASHER policy, so that's active shooter hostile event response. So that's how we are supposed to respond, which is what I'm going to lay out for you here shortly. So they're all trained on that policy. In addition to that, we're doing school walkthroughs. Those are back now that COVID's, I don't want to say it's over, but it's died down, the rules there. So there was a long time that we were doing school walkthroughs on a regular basis on day shift. We weren't able to do that due to the pandemic, but that's up. So that helps because our officers are familiar with the school. There's other school trainings and drills that Captain Lowen can touch on when he speaks afterwards. All of our officers have been trained on room clearing and different tactics and stuff for how we would go about doing this. And in the future, we've also had a big drill at the cinema a couple of years ago. So that was one of the first times that the police and fire really came together as a whole to try to implement one of these. And we have also done rescue task force training, which I'll get into in a couple minutes here at the fire department, where we were actually pairing up with fire department members and going and assisting them while they rendered care on individuals. At the end of October, we're doing a rescue task force training as well with the fire department, where we're going to set up a whole kind of scenario out at the range where we'll have warm zone, cold zone, hot zone, and a whole, so we can actually work together and the fire department can work with us as we're working through a mock scenario. So as far as that's concerned, so our ASHER response, I wanted to give you guys an idea of what it's going to look like if we have to respond to one of these things. It's important to remember that first off, there's no one plan that's going to fix everything. I mean, the school is very different from the hospital, which is very different from a house of worship or the Barnstable County Fairgrounds. But what this plan does is just gives us an idea of almost like a flow chart of if, then, and we can kind of set up different lines of communication so that we can work it out. So the second that we get any type of call for this type of event, first responding officer is going to go there. And one thing that our department feels, and is also our policy, is that an immediate reaction is the most important thing that's going to, cease any further loss of life or any further injury. So we're going to make an immediate action on that. Now, it's up to the first responding officer, the first one that's out on the scene. They're going to determine whether or not this is something that they can go in right away by themselves, first person, or if they wait for another officer so that there's a contact team. Some reasons that might determine this is if there's a bunch of witnesses that can come out and say, oh, they're upstairs in X, Y, and Z, it will give us an idea to kind of locate where the individual is. Might have a better outcome if one officer was running in there after that and they had an idea where a person was. If we have another officer 10 seconds down the road and we have no idea where an individual is in a big building, the decision could be made that we'll wait for that second officer so that we have, that's all going to be kind of dependent on the situation. But once those officers go in, they're going to be an individual contact team. Their main job is to go try to find where the threat is. All right. At that point, it's important to know that we're going to have resources coming from everywhere. The state police, mutual aid from other agencies, the federal government could be coming in, fire department, SWAT team or SWAT teams will be coming in. So as these resources arrive, we're going to be setting up a unified command. So that's going to be with the fire department and any other stakeholders that we need to have in one space in the command area. That's going to be what we call in the cold zone. So that's someplace that we don't worry about any threat. So ideally it would be a distance away from wherever everything's going on, okay? So in the unified command, what they're going to have to do is there's a lot of things that they're considering, and some of these maybe you haven't considered, but things that they need to set up is we need a bunch of different staging areas. Some that we need are first off casualty collection points, so that's once we get to the point that we can remove any injured individuals from the building, they're going to be taken there to be assessed, evaluated, and then moved to a treatment area or the hospital or whatever their needs are. Other areas they need to set up is we need a check-in area, because you may have hundreds of individuals coming to this thing, and we need to know who's on location, know where they're going, know what their area of responsibility is. We also need to set up a media area. We need to set up an internal and an external perimeter. The internal perimeter's job is to make sure whatever the threat is can't get outside. And the outside perimeter's job is to make sure that no threat can get inside into the interior perimeter. And also make sure that anybody that's leaving, if they're not injured, we want to try to interview them and debrief them, and potentially these people may need some further services because this could have a debilitating psychological effect on them. So those are all some of the jobs that they're going to have. Other things that we need to consider is if we have a mass casualty event where we, the police department, is going to be making sure that they can make it to the hospital unimpeded by any traffic. So we'll be setting up roadblocks or whatever. So if we have a slew of ambulances that have to go up to the hospital, we can get them there in an expeditious manner. So once all of this is set up and the officers are inside the building, I'm not going to get into specific tactics as far as how that's going to go, but once the officers are inside the building and they're trying to deal with the threat, the main goal would be to set up rescue task force. What a rescue task force is we typically pair up a couple of police officers with a couple of fire department members, and they're going to go in and they're going to try to evaluate and treat any casualties and get them out of the area that this is happening in. So that would be, the casualties at this point would be considered in a warm zone, meaning the first police that went into the building are trying to find the threat or at least secure area, hold ground as they move towards the threat. So once they have secured a certain amount of area, that's going to be the warm zone. Threat could still pop up inside the warm zone, but we have it somewhat secured. That's the point of the rescue task force. So the police are going to protect the fire department so that we can start rendering aid and getting individuals out of the building to the casualty collection point and then up to the hospital or whatever needs to be handled from there. Usually special response team or SWAT team response takes a little bit of time to get here depending on where they're coming from, and you have a lot of officers that would be off duty and getting equipment and everything. Once they get there, they're going to take over the tactical control of the scenario. So at that point, we would start rotating patrol officers out of different positions and putting the special response team members in there. They will set up their own command. However, the unified command would have overall command and control of everything. So basically the SWAT team, if you will be keeping tabs on everybody that's inside the building and what's going on, but before they proceed with anything that's not an immediate apparent threat, they'll be going through Unified Command and getting clearance to, if we want to move into this area of the building or do X, Y, and Z, they'll clear that with Unified Command. And again, once we've set all this stuff up and hopefully come to the best conclusion of the event that we can, at that point in time, then we have to start worrying about reunification, any debriefings that we have to do, get any information that we can from any witnesses that we were there, set people up with mental health treatment if they were part of a traumatizing issue, and those are all considerations that will be kind of run through the Unified Command and those operations. That's a general idea. Like I said, there's no one size fits all plan, and it really depends because all of the buildings or where, God forbid, this could occur, everything's very different. So sometimes you may be, like in Woods Hole, it might be hard to get your cold zone. There's not a lot of space, so you can't set up 20 trucks and a whole command center. So as far as figuring out, a lot of that unfortunately has to be done on the fly. But these are things that we're kind of constantly thinking about when we go through these drills. And if there's one thing, I don't know what agencies everybody's here from, but if I could kind of challenge you guys with one thing that would help us out is we're very familiar with the schools, we're very familiar with the hospital. If you work for HUI or MBL or some other agency that has a big sprawling building, reach out to us and invite us to do walkthroughs because if we know the layout of an area, it could really save us a lot of time, God forbid any of these things happen. Like I said, we do trainings constantly in the schools when they're on school break and vacations and stuff, so we're very familiar with the layout there. But there's some other big buildings that we don't know. And if you're in charge of one of those buildings and you reach out to us and we can get some officers at least to do a walkthrough or whatever, that would be helpful for us, because God forbid anything happens.
One of the things, depending on the scale of the event, if it's a large scale event, I mean, most, if not the majority of the Falmouth officers are going to be staged at that event. So if you're a member of Falmouth Hospital or the school department, or depending on what type of event takes place, we'll have mutual aid from probably every Cape department, the state police, the federal government will probably most likely send agents. So if you work at Falmouth Hospital and there's victims being sent to Falmouth Hospital, you very well may see a police officer who's not in a Falmouth uniform. It'll be one of our mutual aid partners. All our fellow agencies train in the same way in order to operate in each other's towns in the event that there happens to be an event of that scale that happens. So I just want to be clear with that. Like you might see, I'll just talk real briefly about the incident up in North Falmouth. We had state police, Mashpee, Bourne. We had several different agencies at the school and also at the high school. So if you see officers in other uniforms, that's part of our training regimen, amongst fellow agencies. I'm sure the fire department has their mutual aid as well. Some of the things we've done, we've worked on, Jim touched on it a little bit, just with the training we've done with the fire department and the rescue task force. I can't remember how many years we've been doing this. We started doing some drills downstairs we work with the fire department, but this is a little closer than normal, where we're actually paired up in teams to go in and remove injured parties. So just that familiarity of working with the two agencies together. And this October, we're looking at doing at our range exercise, inviting the fire department and doing some cross training with them. We're looking forward to that. I think that'll be a great exercise to work with the two agencies together. With the schools, we've been doing school safety drills for, I can't remember how many years. There was a pause with COVID. We're back on board, and we look to get the school safety drills back in play and getting the staff at the school on board with the training. And the reunification is another big piece, and we've done reunification drills in the past where students from the schools will be transported to Falmouth High School, where there's a whole reunification. I'm not going to get into the whole protocol, but there's a reunification protocol in place that the school department's done a great job. And that training came into play at the incident in North Falmouth because we needed to evacuate the students and reunify them with the parents, so that we were able to kind of put that into motion. But those are some of the training pieces between the different agencies going forward. But like I said, depending on the level of incident, you could see several different agencies basically take over the town. And afterwards, after the event, as Chief Smith kind of touched upon it, the community is really going to have to come together and everybody to help deal with the aftermath of any type of large-scale incident, because it's going to take everybody's involvement to push the community through that experience. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we would respond to something like that. But as the chief said, it's a law enforcement incident in conjunction with the fire department. After the incident's over, it's considered a crime scene, and investigative teams come in, and that's a whole other level of an incident of any type of caliber. So with that, I know that's kind of a lot of information. I had stats. I know Kim had stats. I didn't want to throw stats out because, as far as I'm concerned, we know the incidents happen. One incident's too many. I don't want to come out here and spit out numbers, but it's some of the communities that it happens in. It's not in these big cities. It's often small towns, sometimes the size of Falmouth. So, the community needs to, realize, we need to prepare and work together as a group like we are today to have these discussions. So, with that, if anybody's got any questions for us, do the best we can to answer them. Or discussions, or yep.
How frequently do you guys go through the schools? For drills or practice, whatever you call it?
We try and do a school each school year. So we'll go in, put the school in lockdown, and then we'll have the students come out with the teachers. And Mr. Stefanelli, who's sitting in the back, is the school safety officer. So we've already had meetings about trying to get the drills back on board this year.
And as far as just being familiar with the schools, we're on day shift, we hit the schools in our sector. I mean, unless it's a very busy day, we're usually in each of the schools every day. Like an officer is in doing a walkthrough, and so the average patrol officer is very familiar with the layout of the school.
So we've got a school resource officer that goes between Lawrence School and Falmouth High School. We have different offices, liaison officers assigned to all the 7 schools in town. And like Jim said, that the day shift, if they can go through the school during their tour each day, that's ideal. Okay.
I love the fact that you encourage our stakeholders to reach out to you to do a tour of those buildings as well, because it's something I hadn't even thought about. Is there something that maybe they can also be doing if they're a large organization like Courier MBL, Steamship Authority, a larger building like the library, any type of mini trainings just for awareness, kind of on the vein of see something, say something.
I know there's resources out there. If you go on to, I believe it's FBI.gov resources, they have specific guidelines for houses of worship or major school buildings, other major buildings. So there might be some feedback there that somebody from one of the MBL buildings down in Woods Hole might gain some pretty good knowledge about how to best prepare their facility for an event of this type. So, and like Jim said, we're available a phone call away. We'd love to come down, and I've been down to the Coast Guard station just to go over the facility down in Woods Hole. So we've been more than happy to do the same.
Any preemptive measures as well? Say there's a large conference somewhere. They expect a large number of people, a diverse group of people. They're not familiar with the community. Should they be letting you know that these types of events are coming up?
Probably, just so we have an idea in the event that we get called down there for one reason or another, we're aware of what's going on. Just a heads up. Sir?
Just a comment. The FBI does have some good programs, and they have print-ready templates on their program for the run, hide, fight, which includes business cards and things like that are free to download, and anybody can use them as part of a program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome, Jimmy. It's like pain of a tube. That's
Table-
awesome.
Future tabletop exercise, perhaps?
Yes, yes.
With everybody?
Yeah, well, keep that in mind
Or
because
something like that?
because I'm gonna
Oh,
Oh,
we're meeting with Mass
all
Maritime,
right.
so
Yeah.
we'd love to have you as
no.
part of the conversation.
I'm gonna
Okay.
put you on the spot again.
Oh, very good.
Time.
All right. Thank you, folks.
So, thanks to Captain Lowe and Jim Porter for their input and their expertise. You know, I do have to say that when we discuss this one particular subject, which is the Asher side of things, which involves a lot of training on a statewide basis, Cape Cod, you know, and the law enforcement community and the fire service are ahead of the rest of the state as far as training, and it seems to be consistent. I don't know if it's because there's two bridges that separate us all, but I think there's more interest, and I think that we see that, you know, because of the way that our communities are, that we're kind of isolated if something was to happen. So I think we take it and run with it a little more. And, you know, COVID did put kind of a dent into things for us for a little bit, but over the years, the one thing that we have done with the police department, and it was always there, but we try and, you know, talk all the time about incidences. We're involved at a lot of incidences together. We know one another, we personally know one another, so that makes a big difference when you're responding to, you know, a very, very stressful situation. Personally, in North Falmouth, when they had this violent, you know, incident that happened, I, you know, was there with our personnel, and we were there off to one side. Should, you know, any of the police officers or anybody else have been injured, and we were there to support their activities. But, you know, I watched, you know, the way that the command structure worked, and normally the fire department is kind of, you know, when the captain was talking about a unified command, usually, you know, when we have a lot of pre-planned events, we come together and we form a unified command so that we manage the incident together. There's always one ultimate incident commander, and in these instances, it would be the police department would have an incident commander that would be working in conjunction with the other agencies, and you work in a unified fashion. It's not the police over here, fire department over here, the FBI over there, you know, another agency over there. Everybody comes to the table because we all have, as LEPC, you know, frequently points out, we're stakeholders here. So we all have to work together because we all have a vested interest in, you know, in participating, because each of us has a different function at an incident. So the communications, you know, side of things is paramount to bring in, you know, a successful conclusion to any event. We have been talking about these Asher events and having this training and this rescue task force that Jim was talking about. We're doing all our training here, and we're planning for this October drill, but we had another big one that was in Mashpee as well, that we had a lot of the Upper Cape agencies get together and practice, and as well as the one that Captain Lowen had mentioned at the cinema. It's eye-opening for us because we're fire and EMS, so, you know, whereas we now have equipment to protect our personnel at these incidences, the police department doesn't go into a burning building with us, and I certainly don't want my personnel to be in harm's way if you know, if there's an active shooting that was in progress, because they know what to do, and we are there to support them, and vice versa. At incidences that we respond to, the police is there supporting us, and you know, whatever we need, they get, and vice versa. So the harmonious activity with our agencies and just being in this community, I can't express enough that we're very fortunate in the community here to have the resources that are available should anything occur in town here. So with that being said, you know, I think it's important too, if anything ever happened and you were nearby and anything was going on, to please listen to, you know, to directions that are being given. by anybody that's in authority. You know, it's very difficult. I've read stories and have, have been to some of these programs where people that were involved, were inundated by just people rushing to the scene because they knew somebody there, and it created a problem, because not only does the law enforcement or the fire department have to be tending to the scene at hand, then they have to deal with other things going on in the periphery, and that creates a lot of problems. It's very difficult to say that to a lot of people because they want to get their loved ones, but in the instance of evacuating the school on that particular day a few months ago, the reunification plans that are in place worked, and we've practiced it. So we've had reunification drills with the schools, and we have other plans in place should we have to evacuate a school, and we've discussed it and plans have been made. So you can trust that if something like that happened, it's not a fly-by-night thing. We've discussed it, and there's been a little practice. Now, that being said, anything that happens at any given time, and like they said, they practice at the schools, they practice at the hospitals, but we always know it's not going to be at the school and it's not going to be at the hospital all the time. It's going to be at at a restaurant on Main Street. And when that happens, on Main Street in the summertime, if something like that was to happen, it's chaotic. But we have the same focus and the same principles for that incident that we do at the school or the hospital. So they will approach it in a standard fashion. It might have a different flair to it, but they will go there with their objectives in sight. We too will go there, and we usually stage and we wait and we work together. We formulate a quick plan. We manage the incident, and we'll take care of everything. You can imagine that, as it was pointed out, we have a lot of mutual aid plans with surrounding communities and police, fire, but we have a very robust plan with everybody. So all we have to do is make one single request, and we continue to add on to that request, and it's done over the radio or by phone, and it's taken care of very quickly, and there's actual procedures and what we call run cards in place that actually list everything. So once you request it, it starts coming. The other part of the Cape, as everybody knows, it's not easy to get around the Cape in the summertime or any other time. So we're not, so we're going to have to do a little bit by ourselves before we actually get extra help there. So, but that isn't unrealistic to us. So we prepare for that, and we know that that's going to happen. But we have enough resources that we can take care of things that we're confronted with, and we will have the resources coming very quickly behind us. It's just may take a little bit, but once it gets together, our management system, and we've all talked about it in many other meetings, that we use the incident command system, and it's an algorithm, and it allows us to put people in different positions and manage it, division of labor, span of control, all these fun buzzwords, and we utilize them, and we can break up large jobs into small ones, and we practice that through this training that we conduct with the police department. So once again, we're very, very fortunate that we have this ongoing training with the police department, and I think that the community is better for it. So I think, and so that being said, we have in the past we've partnered up with the Mass Maritime Academy, and they have an emergency management program where they have cadets that are actively involved in this discipline, and they do their senior projects, and their senior project is a topic that they have to pick, and it's generally some type of an emergency or response that's necessary in a community that is of a scalable event. It means it starts off little and it gets bigger and then it gets smaller again, like a brontosaurus mountain. So Monty Python. They will come in and do these programs for us, and they have enlisted us again, and we're trying to figure out a topic. And I think what we're going to do now, since you said that, I didn't want to spring that on you, but now that you've mentioned it, then we'll probably, you know, maybe think about this and work with it. You know, we won't obviously tell everybody what it's going to be when the time comes, but I think that it's not a bad idea to involve law enforcement this time. Definitely, their tabletop exercises that they put together involves everybody, so it's not just one agency. Everybody gets bit when they do it. But that's coming up, and they've already enlisted us to be involved, so we will do that. And if we have the opportunity to have you involved with us, which we do, we fill this room up with lots of people, and we put groups together. Kim does all that. It's a big benefit because all it does is put everybody together in little groups, and everybody talks. And then you assign a spokesperson for the group, usually the person that's the most chatty. I try not to, even though I am chatty, but I try to not to speak all the time for everybody. So you get people together and give them an opportunity to bring together the group discussion. And what we ultimately want to do is to mitigate or to bring the event to a successful conclusion. But we're also trying to get a good grade for the students too. So they have been doing a very good job over the years. Their professors come here and they observe. They have other observers. They're graded, but they've done a phenomenal job in bringing things to the table for us and to put us together. And it's a good drill opportunity. So we have something to look forward to that. I don't know when that would be. Probably maybe January or so.
Well, yeah, I think usually it's April, so we have many months to pull it all together.
Yeah, they keep getting, when they do give us a date, it's usually pushed off. It's all based on their class schedule. So last time we were right on the last week of their exams, which was really, was a little bit of pressure for them. But anyways, so yeah, so I hope that this was, was educational and instead of putting PowerPoints and everything, because I was giving Jim, I was teasing him because didn't know if he was going to bring a little PowerPoint presentation, but I didn't want to do that. But I figured, we had enough material here to talk and to kind of engage everybody and at least keep your attention while we just did this 1 hour class. So next month, next Thursday is going to be October 27th. Do we have a...
Yep, so the follow-up will actually be with Paul Stefanelli, who is the new school safety director, if I have that title correct, Paul? Coordinator. So Paul will talk about, what his role is within the schools, which is a nice segue from our discussion today.
So that's excellent. I mean, we generally are talking about a lot of other events. We're good at storms. Nobody likes storms, but we're good at, like, if this turned into something, we'd be, this is right up our alley, so we do well in these things. Blizzards, we do well in those. We don't like them because it knocks everything out for us for a few days. And hurricanes, we've dealt with those, tropical storms. So those are the things that we have, that we have participated in this room with our emergency operations center. And again, we manage that with the personnel that we have and our partners throughout the town. Those are long term. But we've been very fortunate that we haven't had these community impacts that other communities have seen, especially on a man-made event, like a large catastrophic explosion or something like that, or a violent episode that affected many. We haven't had those, and I hope we don't. But again, the point being is that the way that we manage incidences on a daily basis prepare us for the larger events, because we usually use the command system daily just for regular events, and we do that purposely so that when we did have something bigger, we're good at the small and we can build on it. And I think that that we're better prepared just by practicing every day. While you've been sitting here, there's been about 5 calls in the fire department already, so it's ongoing, and the police department's the same way. Falmouth is a very, very busy community for law enforcement and for fire and EMS. I think you probably hear us all the time, driving around with all the sirens and everything. And it's been continuing. So we see the impacts of the community activity, the need for the resources in our from both departments, and for us to respond is growing. So we continue to address it, and we'll continue to address it by having discussions like this and getting the message out to everybody. So that being said, I appreciate everybody taking the time here. I hope I don't release you in wet weather, but I can't control that. But maybe it's slowing down. I did see lightning, so be careful. But anyways, but any questions, comments, or anything that anybody wanted to pass along? We'd appreciate it. Any feedback is essential. If not, please don't hesitate to send anything to Kim if you want a topic, if you want to talk about it at some point. Let us know, and we'll try and put something together for everybody. It's very important for us, even for this 1 hour, to do a little presentation and to get some information out to everybody. And I appreciate you guys even coming all the way from the north. So you got a big building, so there you go. So anyways, again, thank you very much for coming here today. I hope this was was helpful. Thank you to Captain Lowen, Jim Porter, and Paul Stefanelli for the work that they do in the police department. Paul is retired, but he's getting sucked back into things on the school level, so can utilize his knowledge to help improve things right across the board for everybody. So thank you, everybody, and be safe and have a great day. Thank you.